There's a friend of mine who I haven't been seeing as much. And it's not at all because I think any less of him, but I am starting to feel like some of the common interests that we used to have, we don't have anymore. And that's not at all his fault. In fact, I think it's certainly much more me in that I've changed and the things that I've been focusing on are a little bit different. The ways I've been spending my time are different. And now I feel like the kind of hobbies I have and the things that I want to do in my free time are not things that really interest him. And some of the things that he does in his free time are not things that interest me. And that leaves me kind of thinking two things. Like, one, to what extent is this just okay and natural? That, hey, we have different interests, and so of course we won't be spending as much time together. We have different hobbies, and so okay, we won't be, as we're spending time enjoying our hobbies, it means that we won't be seeing each other during those times. But the other part of me thinks, or another part of me thinks, well, he is still someone that I very much trust, and I admire him as well. And so I want him to be part of my life in a significant way, right? And so I'm thinking about how to balance those two or incorporate him into activities that we could both enjoy or both do or spend our time together in ways that we both feel like are enriching while also kind of understanding and accepting that maybe that won't be as much time as maybe it had been in the past. And it's not this kind of situation I'm describing is not just unique to him. There are a couple other friends. One, I feel like I have a friend who I feel like she understands me emotionally in a way that kind of no one else does. I have another friend who I feel like I can have very deep, intelligent conversations with in a way that I cannot or do not have with anyone else. And so I very much value kind of the conversations with these people, spending time with them, talking to them. At the same time, I feel like they have other relationships in their life that are important to them. And I understand that relationships take time and effort to grow and nurture and develop. And so, even with them, I would not want them to feel like they have to cater to my needs or my wants or my, enjoyment and put these other relationships on the back burner, kind of take away from them. And part of me says, well, Jamal, how can you change your perspective so that you're not thinking that you having a more developed or more substantial relationship with them competes with these other things that they're doing with their life, right? That it's not a competitive thing, that it can be a collaborative thing, right? That me having a closer relationship with them could also help further some of these other goals or aspirations or wants in their life. And so it wouldn't be, an either or, but it could be a both and a both working synergistically together. So that thought is coming to my mind. And the other thought again is, well, hey, only 24 hours a day. And so maybe they're going to be spending more time with, developing and nurturing some of these other relationships. And that'll just mean a little bit less time for me. And that's just life, right? And to the extent that that is life and that is fine, and I'll have to accept that, then also how can I expand out and find others who I do have good interactions with, who do understand me emotionally, who do have the similar hobbies that I have now, right? And I bring this up to say that it's not, I do not feel like a victim in this, right? I'm not saying it's hard and woe be unto me and, cry me a tear. Like, nah, none of that. In fact, I feel like it's one of these things where it's like, it's, it's maybe as hard as I'm making it out to be, right? And I feel like this sense of feeling like things are unresolved or that I have to continue to think through them or find a new perspective is really just an indicator to me that I have to change in some way, right? That what I'm bumping up against is like the limit of or a boundary of my comfort in or my way of being and how I've been going through life. And that if I were to change, then this boundary that I'm bumping up against would also change, right? And it could very much change for the better to where, these questions wouldn't be coming up. I wouldn't be feeling the same things. I wouldn't be, wondering the same things. And so I do see it as just that, see it as an indicator that I'll have to change my perspective and, maybe my way of approaching things. And one thing that does come to mind to that end is that one thing I feel like I can and should get better at is inviting others to do things that I enjoy more often, right? Because I feel like that then gives others the opportunity to have shared hobbies with me, right? That may be what I'm feeling with, the one friend and feeling like our hobbies are different. Maybe that's more in my head than it is in reality. And that if I invited him to do some of these different things that I'm doing, he would do them and enjoy them. And I would find out that, where I used to think, oh, our hobbies have changed, that's really not the case. Or that, hey, maybe they have changed, but it's a little bit more nuanced. Where before I'm thinking it's an outright no, but maybe in reality it's a, well, not in this situation, but if the situation were a little bit different, the answer would be yes. So I'm continuing to think through this. I think that's something I will have to noodle on and continue to think about. And even if you have kind of comments or suggestions or ideas, go ahead and let me know. Say, drop me a message, put them in the comments below. Say, I'd love to kind of hear some feedback, get some ideas. But I think the kind of overall point that I would leave with you, the thing that I think would help you as well, is that I think it's beneficial to not point the finger at others, not to say they need to change, but to look more at yourself and say, hey, how could I change to get what I want, right? And part of that does involve being clear in what you want. And I think the other thing that that I've been thinking about that I really find interesting and helpful is more of where I have been thinking about certain activities as things I do by myself or for myself. How could I think of these activities as social things that I do with others, right? And in thinking of these activities as social activities, say for example, working out, right? Used to think of, not even used to, I still kind of think of working out as something I'm doing for me, right? For my own health and wellness. But what if I thought of that as something I always did in a group with others? And if I always did this in a group with others, who were the others that I would want to be in this group? And how could I invite others that I would like to be in this group to join in a way where they feel like they are being rewarded, and it's certainly a win-win for them as well. So I feel like this idea of kind of expansion, this idea of making it a win-win, this idea of turning certain activities into more social ones, into having a greater sense of community in these different activities is a big key for my own advancement. And I think I think for society as a whole, I think the certain statistics about, loneliness, anxiety, depression would maybe lead one to believe that there could be more of a sense of community. And I think, of course, the solution always starts with yourself, right? I got to point the finger at me. And so if I can create more of these communities myself, I think I will reap the rewards, and it'll be kind of paid forward in a way. So I hope this finds you well. Again, if you have ideas, suggestions, comments, leave them for me. I'd appreciate reading them, and I wish you the very best. Take care.